When Yaakov met Rachel at the well, he was overcome by emotion. One emotion was tremendous joy and a tremendous sense of affection. But the pasuk ends with the words, Vayisa kolo vayef. He raised his voice in a cry. He began crying. Rashi explains, why is he crying now? He should be filled with joy. Rashi explains, he came with empty hands. He said, my father's servant Eliezer came to the well to meet my mother with a tremendous wealth, 10 camels laden, and I come without anything to give the kala. He began crying because he felt so empty. How could he come to the kala without a gift? This Rashi is very interesting if we take into account who we're dealing with. Rachel Imenu was a woman of unimaginable righteousness. She was a woman who lived in a totally different orbit. Material possessions, little trinkets didn't matter to her. It'd be hard pressed to imagine that it really bothered her that she wasn't being given some little golden yellow medal that shines. But even more, for years and years she waited for this man. She knew that this was the man she was to marry. She waited for this man. She knew that this was the tzaddik of the generation, and she knew that she would share this world and the world to come, eternity, with this man. He finally arrives, and she meets him, and he feels so down, so bothered that he doesn't have trinkets to give her, that he literally lifts his voice in a cry, lets out bitter lamenting. That's difficult to understand. But what makes it even more difficult to understand is why Yaakov came without a present. We know the Medrash tells us that Yaakov ran away from Esav. Esav sent out his son Eliphaz to chase down Yaakov and kill him. Eliphaz was a tzaddik. Eliphaz actually gets to Yaakov and he says, what could I do? My father told me to kill you. I can't do that. You're an innocent man. On the other hand, Matiyah b'tzivo shel aviv, what will be with my father's command? Yaakov says, I'll tell you what to do. Take my money. There's a Gemara that tells us that a poor man is considered like a dead man. Take my money, and therefore to be considered as if you made me dead in some way, you will have fulfilled the mitzvah of kibbut av. Meaning to say, Yaakov gave away the money, he traded the money so that someone else should fulfill a mitzvah, a very noble deed. Now, keeping in mind the fact that he shows up at the well without money for that reason, and keeping in mind the fact that a husband and wife go together into Gan Eden. Whatever level he reaches, she reaches. Whatever level she reaches, he reaches. They share their world to come together. Could you imagine a woman of Rachel Imenu's stature? A woman who's literally living on this earth but barely keeping her feet on the ground, but living in totally other orbits? A woman who sees Rabbi Sheret, who sees the father of the Jewish nation, realizes she's going to join him finally in her ultimate destiny, and she recognizes the fact that he comes without gifts because of a great mitzvah that he did. Would you imagine that it would bother her? Would you imagine that she'd be troubled? Oh my goodness, I don't have some yellow soft metal to put on my wrist? We'd be hard pressed to imagine that Rachel would be bothered by it. So if so, why did Yaakov cry? And I believe the answer to that is the sensitivities of a tzaddik. The ways of the world are such that when you come to a kala, you give her a gift. I can't do that. There are certain social graces, there are certain niceties. I can't do that because circumstances don't allow me to do that. Yaakov was so troubled by that he literally let out his voice in a cry. It wasn't that he was in any sense not interested in doing it. Believe me, he was very motivated to do it. And he didn't do it because he couldn't do it. But the bottom line is, he couldn't go through the normal social graces. He couldn't treat the kala with the kavod due. He felt such a tremendous pain, and he literally let out his heart in a cry. Even though it didn't bother her, it bothered him, because that is the great sensitivity of a tzaddik.